Back with another AD&D Toolkit video. This one's going to be from the Dungeon Master's perspective on managing your campaigns and characters. So you'll find most of the DM tools here, and everything that relates to our campaign would be under my campaigns, and you have a list of campaigns you can be running at once, or you can create a new one here. When you create a new campaign, you need a name for it, and then it'll auto-generate this campaign token for you. This token is unique to your campaign, and that's what you'll share with your players for them to submit to have a character link up or join your campaign. Once it's created, it'll populate here in your list. I'm going to start today with my testing campaign. I have a few characters in here. These are all the characters that are currently active in my campaign. As you can see, you get access to the full character sheet that the player would see. You can even interact with most of this just as the player can. If I wanted to add a few copper pieces to this player, I can do so. If we go back to Sticky Fingers, he's got a 12 copper there. So yeah, if your players for whatever reason are having an issue with their character sheet, you do have access to it. Also helpful in the character sheets to manage their items often. With the rest of the character sheet, I try not, this is going to be up to you as the individual DM, I try not to touch any of the values in here, at least not without the player's express permission. I don't want to violate any feelings of privacy they may have. I don't want to overwrite anything that they intentionally did here, so I try not to touch anything other than managing their items. There's good reason for that. So most of this you can leave alone again for them to manage. The only thing I ever really find I need or want to do is editing their items. You'll see the key up here. If an item appears in this gold print, that means it's valued. I, as the DM, have secretly applied a gold value to it that the player is not privy to. And then the dark teal is if I've given it magical attributes that the player is not privy to, and the light teal is if I make them privy to it. They know the magical qualities. So for instance, for this player, this character, I've given this sapphire, this gem, a value of 375 gold, but I did not check reveal details to player, and so they're not aware of that value. So it appears here in the yellow print so that I know I've already evaluated it, but the player is not aware. For magical items, a little bit different, so you can pick jewelry, armor, pretty much anything to make it magical. Let's see, does he have a weapon here? This long sword. I'm going to edit this long sword, and you have player details, or the details that the player will see that'll be printed out with the weapon. DM details, only you as the DM see. It'll be printed out again in the character's inventory, but only the DM will see it. And then the base price with the value of that sword would be if it's magical. If I check this box for magical, it'll do a number of things internally, so you do want to check that for any magical items. Another thing that it will do is that color coding of making the teal print apparent to the DM and the player. The last checkbox, if you check this, then all of these fields will be visible to, well, everything except the price will be visible to the player. But if you do have a magic item, most of the standard ones that you can find in the DMG I have populated in the database into Toolkit, so it's a one-click thing. If you find a sword +2 of Dragon Slayer, which again is in the DMG, you can just click that, and then it populates the DM details here. It puts the price from the DMG there. It automatically checks it as magical, and if I was to click reveal details to the player and submit this, then the next time I come back here, you'll see in the player details, same thing that you have in the DM details. It would auto-populate for the player. I'm going to leave that unchecked for now and submit this. So now this sword that Sticky Fingers has, you'll see is in that dark teal print, which means I know it's magical and I've given it a value, but the player's not aware of that. As far as the player is concerned, this is still just a standard sword until they identify it magically or by using it, and then I can come back to clicking edit on that item, click that checkbox and submit it, and then the player would now see it in the light teal and he would see all these details about it, plus 2 Dragon Slayer and so forth. So that comes in real handy for tracking equipment on players, that if they have multiple longswords, which one is the magic one, right? If they try and sell some of them off, but not all of them, did they sell the magic one or the standard ones? If they trade to another player, which one did they give them? That kind of stuff. So it's all retained here, and it's up to the DM whether to reveal it to the player or not. And anytime you get onto any other screens, character sheets or what have you, if you click on the campaign link here at the top, that'll bring you back to your most recently active campaign, which is the testing campaign I've been working in. You also have these icons here. If you click this icon, it looks like a power button, the brownish one, that will deactivate a character from your campaign, but keep them connected to it. Meaning, if they're not present for today's session, I would click that power button, that deactivate button, so that anything that occurs in the campaign doesn't apply to that character. But they're still connected to the campaign so they can come back next week when they're available. If I click the red X button, that will boot them completely from my campaign. They still can rejoin it if they have the current token, which is down here for me. So if you wish to kick somebody permanently, like a ban, you first need to click that red X to kick out the character, and then check this box for generate a new token and update, and that'll populate a new token here for you. Any characters that are currently in a campaign will remain, but anyone who looks to newly join will need that new token. So if you kick somebody, change the token, they can't come back. Alright, so once we finish with the characters, one other thing to keep in mind is all of the data on here, or at least all of the relevant data on here, not only can I view it and interact with it, but it is also a lot of it integrated down here into all of these. These are the Dungeon Master modules or tools. They all expand. They all do different things. But for instance, I have a surprise calculator whenever you have encounter surprise to do at the beginning of an encounter with an adversary. You'll see, for instance, my party is currently surprised on a 2 chance in 6, but if I were to add a ranger to this party, so here's a Rangy is my ranger character that's part of this party. He's connected to it, but he's not active. If I activate him and then come back to the surprise calculator, the party now has a 1 in 6 chance of being surprised because they have a ranger inside. So again, all of this, or a lot of this character data, feeds into everything else below. That's where the real power of a toolkit is. I think it's great as a character sheet from the player point of view, but what is really valuable is how it's synergistic with the DM side of things. See, it's a lot of time and table referencing. So when you come down from the characters, then there's some general party data. You can see the party movement rate is set at 90, and that will be set by the slowest member of the party. And I can demonstrate that if I give Witcher here. You'll see he has a 90 movement rate. And if I was to give him, let's see, a bunch of coins and update, Witcher should now be at a 30 movement rate, 30 yards in an outdoor environment, and so the party's moving at 30 yards per round. Similar effect with the mount. So what happens here is, if you've seen the player videos, players have 3 locations for storage. They have their backpack, which is their personal items on their body, a mount, which could be a horse they're riding, or say like a cart and a mule that the party is sharing, and then their permanent storage, or semi-permanent, which could be their home, or an inn they're staying at, or a bank vault, whatever they're using as a base of operations. But so if we go into managing items again, and you'll see here the mount load for this character is 0. It's empty. He doesn't have anything on the mount. But if I was to go back, I could have done this a little more neatly, I guess, but currently the party mount weight is 13. So what happens is on each character, like I just showed you on the character sheet, the mount specific to that character shows how much weight they have on the mount. I'm going to try Morduke this time. Right, Morduke has a couple of items on the mount here, and so the mount load is 12.85 as far as encumbrance. Now that's Morduke's individual mount. If this was a party mount, like that cart and mule combination I was talking about, then this would be Morduke's contribution to the party's cart. And so if I go back to my campaign, that 12.85 for Morduke is actually a 13 because someone else must have a little bit of weight on the mount. And you'll see if I go back to the Witcher now and add some coins onto the mount via the Witcher, this is the row for the mount coins, and I update that, the party weight for the mount has gone up. And so that's a good way of very quickly tracking and keeping track, maintaining and managing the weight on a shared mount or cart or wagon or something like that. Saved me a bunch of time when I thought to do it. It's a great feature, I think. Similarly, we have party average weapon speed factor and dexterity. You don't need to use, by the way, any of these factors here that you don't like or don't want to use, or they don't operate the way you would like them to operate, like the randomized weather I have here. If you don't like it, don't use it, but it's there if you want it. And some DMs had talked to me about breaking initiative roll ties, say. Sometimes in some scenarios they'll use weapon speed factor or dexterity, and they wanted a party average. So that's what these are. In the character sheets, when you manage a character's inventory, you might have noticed they can equip weapons as well as armor and shields, and when they have weapons equipped, the system will average out the weapon speed factor as per the PHB for each weapon, average it out, and then it gives you this value, and then you can compare that to their average adversary weapon speed factor if you wish. Or dexterity, same thing. Some DMs I know like to at times use dexterity to be a tiebreaker for initiative, particularly maybe at range. The highest charisma value in the party, that could be handy if you just want to know what that value is for talking encounters, trading and selling and so forth. And then the surprise values are also here. Adventure data is less party specific and more to the logistics. So the current day in the campaign, and the toolkit will track the days in your campaign and the years and the month and so forth from day one on for years and years and years, for the entirety of your campaign. It'll track the time there. It will not only give you a point of reference with this day for the players and yourself, but it will also automatically add age onto each character, and it ties into a bunch of other systems that I'm going to get into momentarily. And then the season, temperature, precipitation. These values are based upon the locale that the party is currently playing in, and I'll get to that. It's one of these modules down here where you create a city and you can establish the climate, the size, and the terrain that the city is in. So usually the home base city, or at least where the players are adventuring nearby, whatever city that is, I enter the terrain and the climate for it, and that will impact the weather here. For instance, a cold mountainous region is going to have generally colder temperatures, right, than a temperate flatland. Did this kind of on my own, so not sure meteorologically how accurate, valid, reliable it is, but like I said, feel free to use it. It works out well enough for me. Next are player conditions. Oh, and by the way, in case you haven't figured it out with Toolkit yet, anywhere you see these little question marks, the red and white ones, on a PC you would hover over it, or on an iPad you can just tap it and it'll give you a little tooltip there about the item preceding it, explaining it. They can be quite useful. Player conditions. In 1E, diseases and parasitic infections were a thing. They were a mechanic. And I always thought very cool. They went into some detail explaining how to contract them, cure them, resolve them, the effects of them, and so forth. But very difficult to manage, to reference, to keep track of. So I kind of built the system into Toolkit to be all but automated. I like it a lot. Very cool. What it will do is I put all of the factors and values from the DMG, percentages and rates and so forth, into the toolkit, and behind the scenes, as you advance this campaign day, it will roll checks for each character, and it will take again into effect the climate, size, and terrain of the city where they reside currently. And you can change what city that is as your campaign progresses. You can create as many cities as you want. You can then manage them here, and you select what city they are currently residing in or around to determine the weather factors and player condition contraction. For instance, if you're in a very hot, swampy environment in a very crowded city, you're much more likely to contract a disease than if, again, you're in a small, isolated, cold, mountainous village. So in that former case where you're in that swampy, crowded city, I believe you're supposed to check weekly each character, whereas if you're in a cold, mountainous region, you would check monthly. And the chances of contracting something would be different on each of those environments. So all of that, again, is built into the toolkit, and if a player contracts a disease, it'll automatically pop up here. You don't need to do anything. It just tells you what it is. And then the different attributes for that contraction from the DMG are listed here. Is it acute or chronic? Is it severe, moderate, or mild? And so forth. It gives you the duration that it'll last, when it resolves, the onset of the condition, so that you can keep track. You'll notice this says day 2173, which of course is out of sync with my current day, and that's only because this is my test campaign, and I've played around with the days backwards and forwards in time. It wouldn't normally do that. But so for instance, this might say the onset of the condition day was 90, and then I would know I was 6 days into this character's disease, and it's going to take, this total time to resolve. So you would just count forward from the date of onset. When the disease has resolved, or if you've written this down somewhere and you're done with it, just click the X to get rid of it. And then this will be a blank area here. Something that is cool too, though, is you'll see this disease occurs chronically. And on the character sheet, again, it should appear here under chronic conditions, but again, this was on my testing campaign, and I didn't have this feature built yet when this character contracted that disease, so it's not appearing here. But it does on the live site. When a character gets a chronic disease as opposed to an acute one, it will appear here, and keep a running list of all the chronic conditions that this character has contracted over their lifetime. So you don't have to write it down anywhere. It'll just track it for you. And then I would like to say finally, but there's a lot of them, these DM modules. These are the tools for the Dungeon Master. And each of these is essentially a submission form. You enter values, click the submit button, and then the results will be populated here for each of these modules. So for instance, a surprise calculator. You'll see some of these, or actually all of these, are editable. That's not always the case in all the modules, but for instance, this is a D6 roll for the enemy and the party, and I've left them editable in case you want to manually roll dice, because as much as I can with Toolkit, I like paper and pencil and personal interaction. I love using Toolkit for in-person games. I do with my family campaign that we play. That's actually where I first designed Toolkit for, was just for me, for my my family's campaign, and then I just started sharing it because it got so cool. But you can enter your own die rolls here if you wish. If either the party or the enemy has been notably noisy, is it an indoor or outdoor encounter, the type of terrain they're in, because again, this surprise calculator will not only determine surprise, the number of segments of surprise, it will also determine the range at which they encounter each other or notice each other, and that range will vary based upon the environment. It'll be likely a longer distance they notice each other from in a normal environment, normal terrain, which means flatlands, opposed to, say, a forest. And then these values are auto-calculated for you, and only so much that this value will likely change if you have certain classes or races in the party. But you can change them if you have any manual changes to make. But I had showed you here, for instance, when I added the range of this one from a 2 and 6 to a 1 and 6 by default, just to make life easier for the DM. And then the enemy, some monsters might surprise others. More likely, like a large spider, might be better at surprising people, and so you would want to up this. But whatever it is, once you do, you click calculate, and we'll see by this one roll, this party is definitely going to be surprised. And they are. So it just gives you some basic info on what was calculated. The party is surprised for only one segment and on a very short distance, 10 yards. Very uncommon to get that value, but we did. So that's the surprise calculator, and I use that for every single encounter I go through with my players. What I probably should have started down here with were general details and manage characters, so I'm going to do them. Manage characters is just like it sounds, to manage the characters within your campaign. So similarly to how you can deactivate or kick characters here, you can also do it here. Where this is going to come into play, where the top wouldn't, is let's say that rangy character I deactivated. Rangy's no longer here. So he is connected to the campaign. I haven't kicked him, but if I want to bring him back, there's no way to do it other than down here. He shows as connected, just deactivated, and so I can click this to activate him again. So that's all the Manage Characters module is for. You can also, like I said, kick them out here. And the general details, this is general details of my campaign. And everything here is editable except for that token. We want to make sure the system doesn't generally, again, this is a test campaign, so I've got a simple token in there, but generally you're going to check this box, click update, and that'll give you a large randomized string here. The name you can change at any time you wish. Of course, you want to make sure you notify your players if you do, just to avoid confusion. The day of your campaign, you can change that here if need be. I recommend highly you don't, unless there's some sort of emergency or mistake. When you want to advance time in your campaign, you're always going to use this advance time module, and simply adds days from today. So today is day 96 in my campaign. If I add 2 days, it will now be day 98 in my campaign. It will also be reflected here. Now when you change the days or you add days via this module, it interacts with a lot of other systems. It will see if it's time to check for disease contraction. It'll add 2 days of age onto each character that's active in the campaign currently. It'll do a lot of things like that. Changing the days here will not. That's just a manual override for the Dungeon Master for whatever reason they may have. But as much as you can, like I said, avoid it. That is how I got a campaign with a disease contraction of 2,000 plus days, but it's only day 98 because I actually had advanced this several thousand days to check different systems and then reverted it back to 96 or what have you, and now the days are out of sync. Use level max. That is for, I guess it only pertains to demi-humans, where classes have maximum levels they can attain based upon their race. this is a number I'm pulling out of the air, so don't go by it, but for instance, like an elven mage can only go up to, I don't know, level 10 or 12, typically, as per the PHB raw. But a lot of DMs like to get rid of the max level and let even demi-humans go as high as they let their human players go, and so you can make it inactive here if you wish, or if you activate it, then it'll enforce that level max. Campaign status. If your campaign is active, that means things might go on with your campaign even when you're not interacting with the website, because there is a built-in timer, and I'll explain that shortly too. If it's inactive, you're just putting it to rest, which will not allow those timers behind the scenes to go off while you're not interacting with the website. And if you click expired, you want to be very careful with that, because that is deleting your campaign. When you click that, it'll actually give you a little pop-up warning. So yeah, be real careful before you expire your campaign, unless it's what you mean to do. Again, checking this box and then clicking update will generate a new token for you, and all new players that wish to join your campaign will need that token. You can just copy it here and paste it to them. Alright, so monthly expense rate, day multiplier. Let's hold off on monthly expense rate for a moment. Day multiplier. So I've got built in an attempt to emulate or simulate one-to-one time, where when a real life day passes, a day will also pass in your campaign. So I use that for my Wednesday games, my Wednesday campaign, and I have this set to 1. So every time a real day passes, a day passes in my campaign. So if 5 days from now I came back to play that Wednesday game, the day would actually be 103, even though I haven't interacted at all with the website, because again, there is an internal clock advancing days if I have this day multiplier active. If I deactivate it, nothing happens when I'm not interacting with the website. And the multiplier value is how many days you want to pass in the campaign for each real life day. So if I made this 3, then every time a calendar day passes in real life, 3 days pass in my campaign, and so on. I like this tool because otherwise time passes very slowly, and when you're doing a good job of tracking time in a long-term campaign, you want your characters to age. You want them to have a chance of contracting diseases. You want things to happen in the campaign villages and cities around the players, even when they're not the focus of the action. So I want time to progress, and not at 1 or 2 days per session. I want it to progress at a faster pace. So I like having real time. I like being able to have a multiplier in case I want more than 1 day to go with each calendar day. So that's a feature you can choose to use or not. So that'll bring me back to this monthly expense rate. The DMG suggests that DMs charge their characters 100 gold pieces per level of the character per month for expenses, entertainment, and whatever else. I like to use, I tell my players it applies to entertainment, to spell components that are not expressly detailed within a spell's description. So, Wolfsbane or any kind of dust or herbs or whatever. I don't want to have them go shopping and calculate prices every time they tracking their inventory with all of these items. So I just say it's wrapped up in that monthly expense. Repairing weapons and armor for fighter types and so forth. All kinds of values can be plugged into there. In addition to the 100 golds per level, so whatever value you have in here will be multiplied by the level of the player, or the character rather. I have 130 instead of 100 because I also wrap into this their monthly room and board if they don't have homes of their own, say. So this campaign would be low-level characters, and maybe they're all sharing the same inn, and based upon the quality of the inn, which would be slightly higher than common, they're paying roughly 1 gold piece per day or 30 gold pieces per month, and so I add that 30 to the typical 100 per level here. And then how that will work is, again, the toolkit keeps track of the days that transpire, and this expense calculator module, it tells me here the last time I calculated player expenses was on campaign day 83. We're 15 days later on campaign day 98, and so if I click the calculate button, it'll prorate this monthly expense amount for those 15 days. So it should be roughly half a month. So each level 1 character should pay about 65 gold. Let's see if that's what I get. So here's the results. Oh, no, I've got some very high level characters. I forgot that. Oh, he's not. Oh, so what happened here again? Great, not what you want to show in your video, but because of that out of sync time I was showing you, where I have 98 here, but I have 2173 days here. Yeah, if you get your calendar out of sync, this is what's going to happen. Let's see if I advance a few more days or if it's still going to use my old time. Alright, so that's more like it. I haven't done the expense calculator since I had adjusted my calendar manually. But this would be for 2 or 3 days here per character what they're playing in expenses. And you'll see the values are different because Druish and Illusions happen to be level 1 characters and rangy as well. So their multiplier is level 1, whereas someone like Witcher, who's paying 173, is obviously higher level. So he's paying more per month. So that's what your monthly expense rate is and how it works with the expense calculator. And you'll see once I calculate the expenses, this value is set back to 0 because it's been 0 days since the last payment of expenses. So I usually do this once at the end of each of my sessions. I just calculate expenses for that session. Real quick and easy. It's part of my housekeeping at the end of a session. It only takes a few minutes when I use Toolkit. And the last 2 features I have here, 2 hit adjustments. And you can read about them in the player handbook. There are charts both in 1E and 2E, and they use different systems or protocols to calculate it. If you're not familiar with it, it's taking a certain type of a weapon and what kind of damage modifier or adjustment it gets against a certain type of armor. The 1E protocol, much bigger chart, many more values, much more complicated. The 2E is more streamlined, not easier to understand necessarily, but easier to implement. So a lot of people do like that one, even when they're playing 1E campaigns, or you don't have to have either of them. But I will show you how they work. So the 1E protocol, what it will do is now remember every character gets to equip weapons, and so the equipped weapon is all bold print. So he has a broadsword here that he has equipped. And so the broadsword is a slashing weapon, and a slashing weapon in 1E will have these 2 hit adjustments in this lower row against these various armor classes. Only when this armor class applies to an adversary wearing actual armor, not a monster with hard exoskeleton or something like that. It's got to be basically a humanoid with armor. Then you can apply this 2 hit adjustment. If I was to change this to a bashing weapon like a mace, these values would change. Really, depending on if I change this weapon to anything, the values change. In 1E, every weapon has a different matrix versus armor class. And that's where it gets complicated to implement, because every weapon is different, and every weapon has a different value for every armor class. So it's a lot to reference every time they take a swing or at a different armor. The 2E protocol, if we implement that, again, simplified for implementation purposes. So here, instead of having that bottom row, it now says the weapon I have equipped against these various armor types, this is the bonus or penalty that you get on the hit roll. So you can use either of those. It's up to you. You don't need to. If you deactivate it, neither of those protocols will be visible on the character sheets. So you can see they're both gone now. So it's up to the DM if they choose to use those or not. And lastly, Unearthed Arcana. I have weapons, armor, spells and cantrips, a bunch of UA systems, classes and races, sub-races, built into Toolkit that if the DM activates it here, those elements will come into play within the toolkit and be factored in. Whereas if you keep it inactive, it'll be typical official core 1E. Alright, so encounter reactions, very simple. There's a die roll that you can edit if you want to roll the dice manually, or it auto rolls for you. It takes into account the charisma, the highest charisma for each character in the party by default, but you can change this to any value you want in case someone else is talking, parlaying with another party, and then calculate based upon the encounter reaction from the core manuals if they're successful and what the result is. You can see here the result: the adversary is uncertain, feelings are positive, however. And these results come directly from the core manuals. Lockpicking. So, lockpicking, again, the die roll, the percentage die roll, you can do manually or it will roll for you. There are also rolls that need to be made if there is a trap, you need to see if the thief finds it. If they do find it, then do they successfully remove the trap? And then if they successfully remove the trap, do they succeed at lockpicking it, right? Those are 3 different rolls the DM would have to do, and these privately, because you don't want the thief to know if there is a trap and they failed or succeeded or whatnot. But if you were to say there was a trap, then you can edit these values, and if there's not, it just blanks them out and doesn't consider them. Then you get your lockpicking roll, and then you pick your thief. And the system will look through the characters here to see which ones have thieving skills. So if there was a monk here, or a thief, or if you're using UA and it wanted to know if there was an acrobat, any of those could do some thieving skills, and so they would all be selectable down here. In this current party setup, only Sticky Fingers is a thief. If there is a trap or not, you determine that here. Let's say there's not, he gets a 69. Does he pick the lock? What it will do then is take that roll of 69 and compare it to the value here for Sticky Fingers to successfully pick a lock and tell you if he succeeded or not. And it has failed because the 69 exceeds his 62. So you don't even need to reference this as the DM. It does all that referencing for you. Another little bonus, but it's valuable. It does the rolls silently for you, so the player doesn't hear you doing 3 rolls versus 1, knowing there's a trap or not, and so forth. So it speeds everything up. It's real quick. It's easy. So I like that lockpicking module. Evasion calculator. This is for outdoor evasion only. Indoor evasion, you can reference actually under charts and tables on the website here. There is, you can read this table for calculating, does one party evade the other in an indoor environment if they're looking to run away and flee. But for outdoor, it's a little more complicated, and so again, we have a roll done for you here that you can change if you wish, and then the different factors that determine if the party or the adversary can evade the other. The type of terrain they're in, which party is faster than the other or they're equal, the relative sizes of the parties, the ambient daylight, and then you calculate, and it tells you does the evasion fail or succeed. There's your results again. Create city, I'm going to hold off on that because that is one of the little more complicated ones. I'm going to try and get through some of these others first. Spell research. This is for mages and so forth that would like to research a customized spell that they create. It follows the DMG. You need the spell level. Now, this would be determined by the DM, is how the DMG suggests, that the player submits their proposition for their spell to you, and then you evaluate as the DM what level of spell that would likely be, what level of spells it's comparable to. Then, does the player want to inject extra funds to have a greater chance of success? The level of the character that's doing the research, the intelligence of the character doing the research, and then, in your opinion, if this spell is overpowered or not. The reason for this is the DMG suggests, and I would agree, if a player gets too crazy and tries to come up with a spell that is just way OP and just completely going to unbalance things, you're not going to let them have a chance at success at it. But you're not going to tell them that. You're going to say overpowered, yes, fill in all these other features. Let's just say this character is level 7, intelligence is going to be a 16, a 4th level spell, and we do deem it to be an overpowered spell. So we submit, and the reason for this is it calculates the time, 11 weeks of research required, and 26,400 gold pieces go into this research, and it still won't be successful. You want them to pay a price for trying to come up with a crazy spell. That's going to keep them in check. This is one way to handle it. I believe in the DMG, they say you can let the player go on indefinitely until they decide to stop sinking money into the research. So you can kind of hack that here if you wish, that like you might want to say you're going to give them up to 11 weeks, and so you can say, you can just give them like a couple of weeks at a time. There's a minimum requirement. Let's say it's like 3 weeks for any research at this level. And so you could do 3 weeks worth of this cost and say, all right, you've spent so far 5,000 gold, you want to keep going. Or you can just flat out charge them the 11 weeks worth, however you want to handle it as the DM. But I like having this all spelled out for me here. Not only does this speed things up because the data is again integrated from character sheets, but a lot of this stuff, again, like the spell research, I don't know off the top of my head all of the details. So I constantly find myself having to go back, I'm sure like a lot of you, to the manuals in play. And that takes up a lot of time. So I like having these modules to just do it quickly for me. It speeds up our gameplay. We get a lot more accomplished in our sessions. And the players aren't sitting around waiting for me to find the right page and read. Illusions, this is one of the more complicated elements in the toolkit. It's very much homebrewed. It's an amalgam of the DMG, Dragon Magazine, and then a few dungeon masters who I value their judgment. It's very experienced. I like the way they write. I like the way they play their campaigns. And kind of put together my own system for how to handle illusions, particularly like phantasmal force. So all of these factors come into play in determining if the target of the illusion recognizes it as an illusion, then if they make their save, and so forth. So first I determine the number of targets, and the number of targets have to be targets of equal measure. So if I have an enemy of 7 kobolds and 3 orcs, I'm going to do the 7 kobolds first and then the 3 orcs next, because the kobolds and orcs might have different values here. So let's say I had those 7 kobolds. Now the viewer is the target. Are they of animal intelligence or low intelligence, and so forth. Then their save versus spells. Likely a kobold's going to be something like a 17 when saving against a spell. Is the spellcaster known to the enemy as a spellcaster? Have they seen them casting spells before? Or do they just somehow otherwise have knowledge of this individual as being a spellcaster? Because if they do, they're more likely to recognize it as an illusion. Crucial sense is missing. So if you cast a fireball, a true mage fireball, magic user fireball, There should be sound, there should be heat, you're going to feel the impact of it. Those are three different senses, right? So if you cast an illusion, phantasmal force, for instance, very low level, and I believe only one sense can be mimicked with a phantasmal force. So you'll see the visual of the fireball coming at you, but you won't feel the heat or hear the rush of it or the impact when it hits you. So those would be missing senses, and you want to plug those in because, again, the target's more likely to recognize it as an illusion. Something's off. If a friendly unit warns you, maybe you did a check for the orcs first, and they recognize this cast as an illusion. So then they're yelling to the kobolds, it's only an illusion, don't believe it. So you would check, yes, the kobolds are getting a friendly warning. The caster class is the caster, an illusion, a mage, a thief possibly using a scroll, or some other item that a magic item that allows other classes to use illusions. A wand of illusion. So the origin of the illusion you check here, the level of that caster, the intelligence of the caster, sudden appearance. So if you are outdoors and it's flatlands and it's clear skies, and out of nowhere a red dragon appears overhead, that's a sudden appearance. That's going to be more likely to be recognized as an illusion. That's unlikely to really happen. Which leads us to the next one, improbable. If it's an improbable illusion, so if water suddenly sets fire, or you see an orc with 3 legs and 4 arms, very improbable. So that type of an illusion, you'd put yes. And stationary object is the last one, in that if you try to create an illusion of a very large rock, a lot easier to pass that off than if you try to create an illusion of a living, moving, breathing, thinking animal, right? So if it's stationary like that rock, you click yes, and if not, you click no. And then submit it. And it'll tell us if, well, I'll tell you all the results. The illusion quality was a -10, very poor illusion. There were 7 targets, all 7 of them detected it. Only 2 of those that detected it actually made their successful saving throw, recognized it as an illusion, and no longer would take damage if there is any from it. So it takes a minute to set this up, but I really, really like it because otherwise illusions are a lot of fun, but really hard to wrangle in. And I wanted something universal, something constant, so that not only do my players have confidence that I'm adjudicating evenly and fairly for all of them, but that I feel that because your mood and your memory and everything else is going to change from one session or even one casting to the next. So this makes a universal mechanic for it that I can rely upon to say, yep, worked, no it didn't. And it's fair as far as I'm concerned. And for all of these actually, or most of them, these modules here, you'll see you can click to read more about how to use each of these modules and the inner workings of them, how I do some of my calculating on our blog. If you click this link, it'll bring you to our blog and you can read about the individual modules there. Add an image. This one is DMs are allowed to share images with their players. Do I have any in this? I do. Alright, so you can upload images to your Google Drive account. You'll see in this placeholder here, only Google Drive URLs will work. So you enter a Google Drive URL to an image you've uploaded to Google Drive. Make sure you have that image set to public. I like to recommend create a public access folder and then put all of your images into that folder. And once you drop them in, then they're public access. You don't have to adjust the settings on each individual image. But put the URL here. This hint is a label that you're going to put on it to remind you of what the image is. The players won't see this hint, only you will. But little words of the wise, when you upload an image, don't name the image with a name that that will give the players information you don't want them to have. And the reason being, something similar to this, minus the hint, will appear on the character sheet. They'll see the ID of the image, so you can say, take a look at image 35. And then they'll have a view link like this, and when they click it, they'll see whatever image you want to put up. Now, this, you'll see the name of the image, Sotfin Church, this comes up for the player. So if you don't want them to know the name of this church, don't write Sotfin Church here when you name that image file and upload it with this URL. Here, you could put Sotfin Church, and that's not a problem because only you're going to see that. So once you add images here, they will then populate in this table, and if you click Activate and Update, now this image will be viewable by your players, and if you uncheck it and update, it won't be viewable by them. Check this box to delete it. This is the ID. Each image has a unique ID. This is the hint that you give it. Like I said, just for you as the DM, and then you can view the image via this link. So that's images. These are limited. There's several things that are limited in the toolkit. I want to try to keep it free for everybody to use, but there are things that are limited for data reasons and other reasons. But images do have a limit to how many you can upload and access via Manage Images, and if you want to improve that amount, you can always donate, and that's going to allow you a few extra perks. So there's not really many, if any, features here that you won't have access to. You just get access to more if you do support our project. There is a ton of time, of course, and actual financial expenses invested in a project like this, so we really appreciate help from our users. But so that's images. Expenses calculated we did already. Advancing time we did. And I just pass a day usually every time we have an overnight in-game. Managing cities goes along with creating cities. I'm going to put that off one more minute. No, actually I'm not, because we did general details and we did managing images. So finally we have managing and creating cities, and this is a big part, relatively big part of Toolkit as a DM. So you can create as many cities as you want to be representative of the cities in your campaign. You're going to give it a name and then choose your climate, the size, 3 relative sizes here, and the terrain, and these basically just come from the DMG. Once you create your city, it'll then populate along with any others that you've created before down here. The top one highlighted is the active city. There can only be one active city at a time. That's usually going to be the city that the players are using, the party is using as a base of operations, but you can change that at will. Currently I have Hoth set. I'm going to manage Hoth now. So here are the city details. Hoth is active, it's got a seasonal climate, it's a village size, flatland, lodging quality. If you choose NA, because this is a homebrew feature I like, you don't need to use it if you don't wish. If you select NA and edit that detail, then lodging quality mechanic won't be used in your campaign. If you select any of these other values, it will be used. And these are the quality of the lodging that your party is currently residing in. So if they're renting rooms in the wretched, seedy hotel, in a very poor village, they might have poor or wretched conditions, and you would edit that. This quality is going to affect a few things in the toolkit. It's going to give a greater chance of contracting diseases. We're back to that whole disease system again, because they're living in poor conditions. They're dirtier, more diseases, they're cramped and crowded, not cleaned often, all that stuff. Meanwhile, versus if you have a wealthy environment, they're living in, much less likely to contract diseases. It'll also affect things like, you're going to see in a moment how I have shops and pricing for items built into the toolkit, and selling off loot and that kind of stuff. So reputationally, this could impact pricing. If the party is staying in wretched or poor accommodations, they're going to have a poorer reputation in the community. People aren't going to regard them as well, not give them as much value for items they might be trying to sell. Whereas if they're living in very wealthy areas, they're going to have a better reputation. People are going to want to ingratiate themselves to those players. They're going to offer them maybe a better price for things the players are trying to sell. Similarly, charisma adjustment. I kind of homebrewed this too a bit. You can enable it or disable it as the DM, And if you enable it, then pricing from shopkeepers will be affected by the charisma of the highest charisma in the party. Um, if you enable this, and you'll see that when we get down to the shops momentarily. Creating a shop, you're going to name it, pick a category that relates to that shop. Is it an armor or an alchemist or a banker and so forth? Is the shop currently active or inactive? Excuse me. Then there's a buyback range and a selling range. So the buyback range is what it sounds like. That's a range of prices that the shopkeeper will offer to buy back an item from the player. So when the players, or the characters rather, find items in the dungeon or out on adventures, they want to sell them to a shopkeeper. You as a DM, if you remember back to the character sheet where I as the DM can submit a base value for an item, so that, I think it was a Dragon Layer or Giant Slayer sword I had put in there was 4,500 gold as per the DMG. So that 4,500 is going to be used as our base price, and then this shop will offer a price 50 to 100% of that 4,500 when the player tries to sell to this shopkeeper. So this, of course, would be, let's say, a blacksmith that would buy a sword. And the reason there's a range is, again, with the built-in calendar within Toolkit. Every 30 days, this shop will roll a random value between the range here that I as the Dungeon Master set, loosely imitating a fluctuating market due to supply and demand, a new influx of adventurers, or whatever. It's just going to be a varying amount here within a range you establish. So you can make this range as tight, 90 to 100, or as loose, 50 to 100 as you want, and that'll allow for greater or lesser variation in the pricing of this shopkeeper on what they'll offer. This range is reflected down here where the shop buys from characters. You'll see the buyback rate is currently 66% for this shop, and here's the charisma. I have the charisma adjustment. I have it activated in this campaign. So the price is affected slightly by the charisma of the highest charisma of the party. And selling, conversely, is just, it takes into account the base value of an object as listed in the player's handbook. So I don't recall the pricing, but let's say chainmail is like 35 gold pieces. So if I was to set this at 100 to 110, then when the players go to buy chainmail from this shopkeep, the price is going to be between like 35 and, I don't know, was that 39, say, gold, that they'll offer to sell the chainmail for. So once you create a shop, that's what I've done already. I've got a few shops down here. And so this is that pointy end shop again, where they buy items or they sell items. So when my players go into the pointy end, which I believe I have as a blacksmith, and they want to buy blacksmith items, or this might be a weaponsmith actually. So here's the base value, this first column, and that's determined again in the player's handbook. A bardiche would sell for 7 gold. This shop is currently selling at 100% of the PHB value. That's what was rolled for this month. But there's a charisma adjustment of 12.5, so even though the book says 7, they're actually getting a discount down to 6 gold and 3 silver because they have a higher charisma in this party that is helping them bargain the price down a little bit. And it'll do that for every shop you create, and each shop lists items relevant to it. So the leather shop only sells leather items. This saves me so much time. It's great that it provides variation both for any adjustments I want to make, but also over time, that randomized factor. So I really, really like this system. And even better than the selling part, I think, is the buying part. That when I go to the pointy end or any of these other shops, it will read, here's my characters in the campaign on the left-hand column, and it reads all of the items that you can see in their backpacks that are relevant to this shop. So the pointy end, being a weaponsmith, will be interested in buying weapons, and so it's listing all the weapons the party owns, who owns it, then the value for it. So the value by default will be from the PHB unless, like that giant Slayer sword that I gave Warduke, if you recall, I gave it a 4,500 gold value. That's what's showing now. Now, the shopkeeper, you decide if they're privy to this value or not, because this item is not identified yet, right, to the player. So you can have the shopkeeper be ignorant, or actually knowing but playing coy, or honest and upfront and forthright and say, no, that's a magic sword. Up to you how you want to play it. If you're going to be forthright about it, this is the value you would offer the player based upon the adjustments. If not, then you do have to do a little bit of math. Here's your base value. You have to instead take the base value of what the long sword typically goes for, which is 15 gold, and then manually do your 66% of the 16 or 15 gold that it was, and that's what they're going to offer them for it. But I really like this system. Not only does it price everything out for you, but let's see this quickly here. So Warduke has a $4,500 item there. I'm going to go back to Warduke so that I can demonstrate this for you. So you'll see currently now he's got 0 coins in his backpack, Warduke. I updated that. I'm going to go back to the shopkeeper. Remember, 0 coins for Warduke, and he does have that sword. And the pointy end is now going to buy the sword for $33.41, and Warduke's going to sell it. And when he does, if I go back to Warduke, you can guess, I'm sure, the sword is gone, and now the player has coins. It's actually converted that to 668 platinum. I think I've got a threshold of 500 gold. If what the shopkeeper is paying is over 500 gold, it converts to platinum. The way I think a real shopkeeper would do. You can't expect a player to walk off with 3,400 gold pieces. So it gives them platinum and then the change, and the sword is removed from inventory. And you can check off as many of those boxes for as many players as you want at one time, and so you can immediately, very quickly, sell off all kinds of stuff. All the calculating is done, the coin transactions, the items being deleted, all done with just a couple of clicks. Really, really speed things up. Gives you that universality for fairness and consistency over time. I love that system, so I hope you do too. But I think that is it. At least all I can think of currently for the Dungeon Master perspective. I'm sure I'll think of a few other things at a later time and maybe do a couple of small follow-up short videos. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was really useful. I hope it encourages you to give Toolkit a try. I know, of course, I'm the developer, but I really do think, particularly from the DM's perspective, it speeds things up, makes it so much easier, so much more efficient. It doesn't really interfere with the paper and pencil rolling actual dice part of the game, which I love, and I still do. That's why all of my modules allow for you to do your own die rolling and whatnot. Because I do my own die rolling, but if you don't care to, you can use the automated values. But I think Toolkit makes just gameplay so much smoother and more fun for everyone, because it keeps the play streamlined and moving along, and you don't get bogged down constantly looking at tables and reference charts and so forth. So again, I hope you liked it, and I will see you all again.